Now on Indianapolis This Week, showdowns in the State House. State lawmakers kill a plan to expand civil rights as a new battle boils over paying to fix Indiana's roads and highways.
So you guys ready for a radical idea?
Feeling the burn, counting down to the New Hampshire primary as we meet some of the people pushing the Bernie Sanders campaign here in the Hoosier State, and remembering an Indiana legend, paying tribute to former Governor Edgar Whitcomb.
From RTV6, Indianapolis This Week.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for spending part of your Super Bowl Sunday with us here on Indianapolis This Week. Before the Panthers and Broncos square off tonight, it was the Republicans and Democrats locking horns this week, both at the State House and out on the presidential campaign trail. Let's start at the State House, though. The legislature now moving into the second half of a short session. This week, the Senate effectively killed a plan to expand Indiana's civil rights law, saying the time isn't right. And the focus turning to the showdown over road funding, two competing plans with one main sticking point, whether to raise taxes to pay for it. That's where we begin with State House reporter Katie Hines with one of the key voices in the debate, State Representative Ed Soliday.
Representative, we appreciate a few minutes of your time. Tell us, how do you plan to sell your transportation plan to the Senate?
Well, the very way we started for 5 years, and that is to say, here's the data, here's where we're at, here's the need. And if we deal with the facts and kind of keep politics to the side, I think we can get there.
Do you see room for negotiation between the House plan and the Senate plan?
Oh, absolutely. We already have the Senate plan as part of our plan. Ours is just more comprehensive. The thing we can't agree on, I don't think I could get a compromise, and that's borrowing money. We're just not there. We're still paying $100 million a year on debt that was created in 1998, and my kids are going to do that. We actually felt so strongly about it in 2007, we banned borrowing money to maintain roads.
Have you talked to the governor? I know that he has said tax increases are kind of a non-starter for him. Do you think you can get him on board?
Well, I think he has his own viewpoints. We'd like to try. The bill is revenue neutral when you look at it over the long term. And quite frankly, in the gasoline tax, we're just truing it up for the net dollars that we were taking out of the user's pocket in 2002. So in my mind, it's not really a tax increase. Now, he has several options. I mean, he can, if he just feels conscience-wise he can't sign a bill, if we can reach an agreement, he can leave it lay on the desk and let it become law.
Democrats are arguing that your plan is risky. They say the two tax revenue streams are set to decline in time, and we'll be right back where we started.
Sure. Nothing is forever. I heard Fred Smith talk, and he said, if you don't like change, you'll hate extinction. So we know, with the tool that we created and was reported out in 2015, we know that gasoline tax is going to decline over time with the CAFE standards of 2025. So this is intermediately sustainable. We know that. We've looked at the tool. But we have the tolling study throughout the country. VMT, vehicle mileage tax, has been studied, but that's politically unattainable right now. So risky in what way? I don't know what's risky. This is a certain revenue stream. So I think there's a lot of posturing going on right now, and I think that'll sort itself out in the session.
Thanks to you both. Now the fight's certain to go beyond the legislature and into the race for governor. We talked to Democrat John Gregg and Governor Mike Pence about transportation as they filed formal paperwork to appear on the 2016 ballot.
Back in 2012, we put out a comprehensive infrastructure plan, which included cities, towns, and counties, as well as state. But it also not only included the roads and bridges, it included broadband and cell tower.
My focus will be to continue to work on the issues that are of paramount importance, I think, to the balance of this session and to the people of Indiana. Making sure we maintain the momentum in this economy, making sure that we stand by our teachers, stand by our schools, making sure that we make the right investments in infrastructure without raising taxes.
And now on this Super Bowl Sunday, time to have your voice heard. Would you be willing to pay more in cigarette and gasoline taxes to fund road construction? You can vote right now in that poll on our Twitter account @IndyThisWeek. More now on the ongoing fight over civil rights protections for the LGBT community. State senators this week declaring the plan dead after the Republican caucus could not reach an agreement on a plan to move forward. It's a big setback for proponents of the changes in a debate that is not likely to end anytime soon. Here now are Rafael Sanchez.
Joining us now is Megan Robertson with Tech for Equality, a group that was created to promote civil rights protections statewide. At the State House, you've been told no this year on any kind of bill. What's next?
Well, I think what's next is that we're going to continue to fight for this issue. Whether it's this session, next session, or as many sessions as it takes, we're going to continue to stand for LGBT protections at the statewide level. House Leader Pilaf has said that there's a possibility of something happening. Is that possible? I think anything is possible. When you look at the legislature and see the major events that are going to be happening in our largest city in Indianapolis and in our state over the next couple months, anything's possible. You have seen the polls that tell us that there's been a seismic shift in what people believe about the LGBT community. If in fact people have a better attitude or we're open to this issue, why is that not reflected in the State House? I think when you get into the State House, sometimes the public's voice can be muted a little bit, and it becomes a lot more about insiders and lobbyists and things like that. When Hoosiers across the state have realized that it is possible and totally legal for LGBT Hoosiers to be fired, denied housing, denied services just for who they are. And they've said clearly that they don't think that that's what should be happening, but sometimes it takes a little bit for our legislative leaders to catch up with the public. It is a gubernatorial race in 2016, so will this be a major issue in this political season? I think it is going to be an issue this political season. Obviously, the candidates are always looking for a contrast, and this is one of them, and it's an issue that's pretty simple to explain. So I do expect to see a lot of campaigning on it, both from the right and the left. Will your group have to decide whether to support John Gregg or the incumbent, Mike Pence? I don't think our group is likely to weigh in on the governor's race, as we have people from both sides. We're a nonpartisan group, but at the same time, I think members of all of these organizations as individuals will be making those decisions, and I think they're going to look closely at how people are voting and acting on these issues. Will you be spending money or raising money for either cause? We are a state PAC, so we have the ability to be engaged, but that'll be determined by what our members want to do. Megan Robertson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. And Jason, now back to you.
Thank you, Rafael. Coming up, feeling the burn in Indiana. So who are the Hoosiers backing Bernie Sanders? We meet some of his most vocal supporters next. You're watching Indianapolis This Week. And welcome back to Indianapolis This Week as we turn now to the race for president. An extraordinary week following the Iowa Caucus. Of course, Ted Cruz with the upset win over Donald Trump in the Republican caucus, and Marco Rubio gaining momentum heading into New Hampshire this week. And the virtual tie between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders giving signs the Democratic race may last much longer than many expected. Sanders' rise in popularity has us asking who's supporting his campaign here in Indiana. So I went to find out.
He's not bought, he has never wavered, and he stands for all the people.
A fired-up crowd of Bernie Sanders supporters rolled into the State House Tuesday, getting Sanders' name on the Indiana ballot, just days after Clinton's campaign did the same in the Hoosier state. His official Indiana representative, a stay-at-home father of 5 who, besides voting, has never been in politics.
So I am actually very typical of all of our volunteers. So this is a very grassroots, new to politics group.
Fresh off a strong finish in Iowa and ahead of New Hampshire, where polls have him up by roughly 20 points, Robinson says the narrative that their supporters are only younger or millennials is simply wrong.
I would say a third, or maybe 30% of our signatures came from college campuses.
But this was a pretty diverse group that you had here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our volunteer base comes from all walks of life. You have professionals, you have, workers, and so it's really amazing to see the great diversity that we're attracting. One thing that we need to understand about the Bernie campaign is there's 2 parts of the campaign. There's the getting Bernie Sanders elected campaign, which is very standard. Then there's the political revolution he's calling for. And so as the momentum builds, you will see much more political revolution-focused activities with, as you've seen, large crowds gathering together demanding that we have a change in our country.
And we want to welcome in our political insiders right now. And let's start in the middle with Kip 2, former Indiana Democratic Party chair. Abdul Hakim Shabazz, IBC, you name it. You're all over the place anyway all the time. And Mary Beth Schneider. Let's start with the presidential campaign right now. Let's go right to left. Is Hillary Clinton in trouble?
I don't necessarily think she's in trouble. I think Hillary will be the nominee. And actually, I think this is actually good for her because she kind of had this air of inevitability and sort of being the anointed empress of the Democratic Party. Having to work for it really makes you appreciate the job and also makes you a better candidate down the road.
Okay.
It's going to be rare, but I'm agreeing with Abdul.
Nice to have you.
On all of those points, and I also think it's good for the country. The Republican Party has pulled this country to the right over the course of the last 30 years, and I think the debate we're having in the Democratic Party now is going to bring us back to the middle is where we ought to be.
I think she is in a little bit of trouble. The most recent national polls showed it had narrowed considerably. She was down with Bernie Sanders in the 40s. I think it was like 44, 42, something like that, and she had been 30 percentage points ahead. On the flip side of that, though, I agree she's a better candidate when she is pushed. And I think that, I don't think it's so much that she took Bernie Sanders for granted, but she acted rusty. She acted like she didn't have her stride. She's starting to get it. I don't know right now whether she'll be the nominee, but I know it seems like every Democrat in the establishment and in the United States Senate want her to be.
You saw that in the debate a little bit on Thursday night. She's starting to push back a little bit more than I think she had been before.
And also you got to understand, too, that 96% of the delegates on both the Democrat and Republican side are all chosen after South Carolina. So, I mean, this is basically sort of a thinning of the herd process, but the bulk of the delegates have yet to be picked.
I would say she'll probably lose New Hampshire. I mean, all the polls have her way behind in New Hampshire, so she's going to come out of Iowa with a virtual tie and lose New Hampshire. So it's not going to be a good couple of weeks for Hillary Clinton. But I assume after that, she starts to rise.
Yeah, and also remember, Bill Clinton lost the first 5 primaries when he ran in 1992. So
she's been down this road before. On the Republican side of things, who was the biggest winner coming out of Iowa going into New Hampshire this week?
Marco Rubio. The fact that he sort of came out of nowhere, people weren't expecting him to place anywhere near as well as he did. He was a big winner. Ted Cruz, I used to live in Iowa. The Christian conservatives, they would have gravitated toward him. It's amazing how many people left Donald Trump and what's-his-face, Dr. Ben Carson needs to stop whining about politics. Use the men's room, grow up. Politics ain't no beanbag.
Yeah, I think, I will say this, I think Rubio did the best job of spin coming out of Iowa. We're going to see Tuesday whether or not New Hampshire vindicates his strategy. I still believe Kasich and the governor of New Jersey are going to give him a run for his money up there in Iowa, and we'll see what happens.
What about Trump, Mary Beth? Is he in trouble?
Yeah, actually a bit of trouble because he needs to prove that he has voters, not fans. And right now, he's got to win, I think, New Hampshire. Otherwise, it looks like he just has a cheering crowd, but not an organization that gets people to the polls.
From the presidential campaign trail now, let's turn to the State House. The debate over civil rights protections, of course, this week. Was there a debate? Was there an actual debate going on?
Behind closed doors. Yes. Yeah, back in the Republican Caucus in the Senate, that's where they really fought it out. And unfortunately for the public, we did not get to participate and listen to that. It never made it to the floor of the Senate. It's too bad.
But this is how the process works. Both the Democrats and Republicans caucus all the time on bills, on legislation. And if the votes aren't there to move things forward for one reason or another, what would have been the point of bringing the bill down, going through 27 amendments, and scrolling back and forth, only to have nothing happen in the very end because the votes just weren't there?
Well, the unfortunate thing is the Republican leader, David Long, told everybody from the beginning that there were going to be a debate on the floor, that we're going to have the discussion, and then they didn't. And I think he's right. It wouldn't have changed anything. They counted their votes inside the caucus, but the discussion needs to be had, continues to be had, because it's the only way we're going to make progress on this issue is if we have the discussion out in the open. And that was unfortunate. I think that they decided not to do that.
But one thing you got to keep in mind, though, number one, there was some discussion in the 4.5-hour committee hearing that a bunch of us sat through to bring this bill up, number one. And number two, another thing, there was some slight movement on LGBT rights because for the first time, sexual orientation can now be taken, at least as far as the Senate is concerned, can be taken into account when looking at quote-unquote bias crimes, just like race, gender, age, etc.
The real point here, though, is that the lack of leadership on Governor Pence's part. He hid underneath his desk inside his office. He made a statement at the State of the State after 6 months of saying, I'll make my views known clear at this point, but instead he hid under the desk. The reason we didn't move anything forward is squarely on his lap in the governor's office.
Let's talk about the governor really quick on the infrastructure front. He doesn't want taxes raised. Representative Soliday pushing that plan. If this isn't an election year, is he possibly more on board with that plan? No one likes raising taxes in an election year.
Yeah, but I think that, no, they don't like that. But that's why they stuck in the tax cuts down the road in that plan to sweeten it. But it's a good long-term plan to get the state taking care of a lot of infrastructure problems. And I thought it showed some guts on the part of the House Republicans to put it forward.
And look, I'm actually amazed that the House Republicans in an election year got as many votes as they did for a tax increase. Especially, I mean, to me, it's a bit of a sea change because I've been over there at the State House for a long time, and there's been a grip, I think, since the Bayh administration about no taxes get raised. And so this is the first time I've seen something like this. It's pretty amazing.
And you have to look at it in perspective. It's A, it's approaches for the long term. Number two, would you rather pay what basically amounts to $22 a year for new roads or $300 at your mechanic for a new alignment because you hit a pothole?
Yeah.
You can weigh in with our insiders on that right now on Twitter. We are there as well at Indy This Week. Thanks so much for being here. Quick, Broncos or Panthers today?
Who do I want to win?
Split, yes. Who do you want to win?
I'd like to see Peyton get a Super Bowl championship, but I'm afraid it's going to be an uphill battle.
I'm a Bears fan. We're eliminated from the playoffs during spring training.
We've been eliminated since '85. Yeah. Thanks, Abdul. Join us on Twitter right now at Indy This Week. We'll be right back.
I'm proud. I'm excited to announce my
candidacy. He served as the leader of the Indiana Republican Party, but can he win the party's nomination for U.S. Senate? We're talking with Eric Holcomb next. You're watching. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We turn now to the race for Senate here in Indiana, and to do that, we're joined by Republican candidate Eric Holcomb. Eric, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Great to be back.
And before we talk about the race for Senate, let's talk about Governor Whitcomb. You were very close to him, and I know this week's news was rough.
Yeah, heartbreaking. I'm sure, knowing him, that he's shaking up heaven right now, and glad he is there and thinking about his family. But what a guy. I mean, Hollywood could not do it justice, his story, and he always obviously answered our state's call and our nation's call at the times that we needed him the most. But I sure will miss him, and so will just thousands of Hoosiers. People revered this man all over the world. I mean, his story had no boundary.
Let's talk about the race itself now. When it comes to fundraising, you're falling behind both Marlin Stutzman and Todd Young. Is that an indication of anything going forward into May?
No, not at all. I mean, I'm actually encouraged that we're able to continue to grow as much as we do every single day. That's a real sign of strength in my experience. We are people-powered and locally driven. Every day I'm able to measure the new folks that have signed on board. The message is resonating. The organization is growing. So I couldn't be more proud. I haven't raised $1 million in Washington, D.C., and that may be what is a good indicator for me that I am not dependent on. We'll have the resources to get our message out. If you may not be counting, but we're 87, 88 days away from the primary election on May 3rd, and we have a plan to get our message out across the whole state of Indiana. But I think, quite honestly, and what is really working is there's no substitute for showing up in person. And I'm kind of in perpetual motion and on the ground and growing this thing very locally. And if you look at everyone from all walks of life, different experiences, different perspectives that are signing on board this campaign, it's very encouraging. So I think we're where we need to be right now. I feel almost liberated to be able to go to all 92 counties. Last year, I announced in late March, and we made a really a point to visit all 92 counties again. It wasn't my first time being to all 92 counties, but I went back, put 25,000 plus miles on the car. The circumference of the earth is 24,901 miles. So we literally drove around the world, all inside of Indiana.
You spent some time on WGN Radio in Chicago. They were asking about what's right in Indiana, comparing it to Illinois' floundering financial situation. I'll ask you the reverse. What's wrong in Indiana right now? What can the Hoosier State improve on?
We need to fix our on the national front. I mean, we're kind of clicking on all cylinders. We are leading the pack. We are the envy of the nation in so many of the all-important categories, and it's because of, may I say, Republican leadership over the last decade plus. We turned this state around, got headed in the right direction, but what we're up against are national policies that are holding us back. And I hear about this whether I'm in rural areas or urban areas. It doesn't matter where I go. Folks are concerned about not just our national security, but our economic security. It's just a complete contrast, a tale of two cities, really, so to speak, Washington, D.C. and Indiana. When you think about our financial portfolio and our situation here in Indiana, AAA credit rating, we took a $800 million debt and we converted it into a $2 billion surplus. And then when you look at the national front, what we're up against this tax code that strangles us, regulations that strangle us, and $19 trillion. I used to say $18 trillion national government debt. Now it's $19 trillion. We're on two parallel paths to bankruptcy when we're talking about Social Security and Medicare. So we're not addressing the things that are really driving this debt, and now we're ushering in more deficit spending. So it's a complete contrast, the state business and the national business. We got to get our national government sorted out and apply some real big, bold solutions to the bold problems, just like we did starting in 2005 and continuing through to today.
And finally, on the Super Bowl Sunday, do you have a prediction going into the big game?
Oh, Peyton all the way. I mean, again, Hollywood couldn't write a better story, and so I see a 2-point win, and probably in the last 2 seconds, Peyton coming through.
We'll see. That's why they play the game.
That's right.
Eric Holcomb, thanks so much for being here.
Great to see you.